First story. I let my new husband abuse my son. Let his kids bully my son. Now my stepkids broke my son's drone and phone. And my entitled son put a lock on his door. So my husband grounded him. And my ungrateful son packed his bags to leave my house. So I told him his dead sister will be disappointed in him if he abandons me. Now I'm regretting my actions. He didn't even care about my new baby. Hi Reddit. I never thought I'd post here. But after a major blow-up between my ex-husband and my current husband, I don't know if I'm genuinely doing what's best for my son, or if I'm so focused on keeping the peace in my home that I've become a pushover. I'm 43F, married to James 45M, and we have a blended household with my son J 15M from my previous marriage and James's two sons, Ryan 14M and Caleb 12M, my ex-husband, D 42M, and I share custody of J. He lives with me and James for most of the week and spends weekends and holidays with his dad. D and I split up after the most devastating experience of our lives, the sudden death of our daughter Lily at 11 years old. That was 3 years ago. And while D and I have both tried to build new lives, the grief left deep scars. I think it hardened him in some ways and made me more fragile in others. He and I couldn't grieve the same way. The tension grew unbearable. Eventually, we divorced. There was no cheating, no abuse, just a deep incompatibility in how we coped. I've remarried, and James has been good to me in many ways. He stepped in when I was falling apart, and he helped stabilize my life. But parenting-wise, things have been rocky, especially around Jay. James is a very rules and structure kind of guy, and he doesn't have a lot of flexibility when it comes to house rules. That was fine when it was just his boys, they're more naturally obedient and laid back. Jay, on the other hand, has always been more independent and guarded, especially since losing his sister. He's not disrespectful, but he doesn't warm up easily. And I think James took that personally. They've butted heads several times over the past 2 years. One time last year, James grounded Jay for refusing to participate in family game night. To me, Jay had just asked politely if he could sit that one out because he had a test the next day and wanted quiet. James saw it as rudeness. That incident simmered for days. D found out and exploded, accusing James of treating Jay like a prisoner. That was the first time James threatened to call the cops if D ever came to his house again uninvited. Things cooled down after that, but the relationship between D and James never recovered. They hate each other. They only communicate through me, and even that's strained. Now here we are again. But this time it's worse, and it's about a damn door lock. A couple weeks ago, Jay told me his stepbrothers had been going through his stuff. They'd been entering his room when he wasn't there, borrowing things without asking, and a few of his personal items, including his drone camera, got broken. That drone was expensive. Jay saved up for months and bought it himself. I get why he was upset. He came to me first. I told him I'd talk to the boys. I told them to knock it off and respect Jay's space. James also told them the same. But then I guess it happened again. Ryan apparently borrowed Jay's headphones and left them in the garage, and Jay had had enough. So, Jay bought a latch and lock set from Amazon and installed it himself. James was not happy. He saw it and said he wasn't comfortable with any child locking their door in a house he owns. He called it a security and transparency issue. He said he's seen too many kids hide things behind closed doors, and he believes in an open door policy for kids under 18. To be fair, James has been upfront about this rule since before we moved in together. But he never made exceptions either, even for a teen with a unique situation like Jay's. I asked James to just let it go this once, to make Jay feel like his space was respected. He said no and removed the lock while Jay was at school. Jay came home and was furious. Understandably. I felt horrible and told him I didn't know James had taken it off, which is true. James made the call without telling me first. I confronted James privately, and he stood firm. He said Jay was sending a message that he's separate from the family and didn't want to be a part of us. That locking his door was symbolic of exclusion and mistrust. I told him I think a 15-year-old boy has every right to not want his stuff rifled through, and that he's not hiding drugs or doing anything wrong. He just wants privacy. James doubled down, saying Jay's behavior is becoming secretive, and that he's a bad influence because now Ryan and Caleb are asking why they can't have locks too. He said I was picking favorites by excusing Jay's attitude. The truth is, James has always had a hard time bonding with Jay. He doesn't understand that Jay isn't like his boys. Jay lost his sister. He's had to split his life between two homes. He's guarded because he's learned not to trust stability. I've explained this so many times, but James just sees it as teenage rebellion. Then Dee found out. I knew it would be bad. I didn't even want to tell him, but Jay vented during his weekend with him, and all hell broke loose. Dee showed up unannounced, fuming. He didn't even knock, just rang the bell and asked to talk to James man to man. I told him to calm down and that we should handle this together. He said, "No, I'm going to make it clear to that man that he doesn't get to treat my son like a problem." I begged him not to escalate it. But he marched to the porch and told James to reinstall the lock, or he'd personally install another one himself. James said, "You're not doing anything to my house." Dee said, "It's not your house. It's my son's house too, he lives here." James snapped, "Does your underage son legally own this house?" "No." "Then shut up and get off my property." Dee called James paranoid. James told him to go ahead and call the cops, because he'd love to report someone trying to break into his own house with tools. It got real loud, real fast. They were cussing and threatening each other. I had to pull them apart before it turned into something physical. After Dee left, I got a flurry of texts calling me a coward for letting this happen, saying I'm a terrible mom for letting my husband bully our son, that I'm too scared of upsetting James to stand up for my kid. It stung because part of it felt true. But what does he expect me to do? Demand James change his entire philosophy on parenting? Undermine his authority in his own house? That's not a simple ask. At the same time, Jay looked at me that night with disappointment I haven't seen in a long time. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I could feel it. That I hadn't stood up for him the way he needed me to. And now things are worse because the fight didn't end when Dee left the house. It followed us into the next day, into my phone, into my head, and into the way Jay stopped talking to me. That alone told me how deep this cut him. He wasn't acting out, but was withdrawing, which is exactly what he's done ever since his sister died. When something feels unsafe or out of his control. That's something James doesn't understand. He thinks withdrawal is manipulation or defiance. Dee understands it because he's lived it too. I understand it because I carried this kid for 9 months and watched him fall apart at 11 years old. I brought it up to James that morning. I told him I felt targeted and unsafe. James didn't deny that Jay was upset. He said, "He'll get over it." That response set me off more than the lock itself. James then brought up a list of past incidents he's been holding on to. Things he's never fully let go of. Jay refusing to hug him goodbye last Christmas. Jay keeping headphones in during family dinners. Jay spending more time texting friends than bonding. Jay locking his phone when someone walks by. James said it all adds up to secretive behavior, and that as a parent figure, it's his job to intervene early before it becomes a real problem. He also said Dee encourages this by treating Jay like an adult instead of a kid who needs firm expectations. I reminded him that Jay is 15, and that grief didn't freeze his development, it complicated it. James said grief doesn't excuse disrespect. Here's where I admit my own fault. I didn't push back hard enough. I let the conversation end without resolution because I didn't want another fight. I've learned over time that when James feels challenged in his own house, he digs in harder. So I chose silence, hoping things would cool off. They didn't. That afternoon, Dee texted me a long message. Not angry at first, just disappointed. He said Jay told him the stepbrothers were still going into his room. That they'd gone through his desk drawers and joked about searching for contraband. That James laughed it off when Jay complained and told him, "If you don't want your stuff touched, don't leave it out." That part made my stomach drop. I confronted James about it, and he didn't deny it. He said the boys were messing around, and that Jay needs to stop acting like a guest instead of part of the family. That's when I snapped. I told James he doesn't get to decide how Jay processes being in a blended family. I told him he doesn't get to punish Jay emotionally for not bonding on his timeline. I told him removing the lock without talking to me crossed a line. James got defensive. He said I always side with Jay because I feel guilty about the divorce and about Lily. That I project my grief onto Jay and let him get away with behavior his boys wouldn't. That was cruel, but it wasn't entirely wrong. Guilt does shape how I parent Jay. I won't deny that. But guilt doesn't mean I'm blind. It means I'm careful. The argument ended with James saying, "I'm not reinstalling the lock." End of discussion. I didn't argue further, and that's on me. That evening, Dee called me. He rarely does that anymore. His voice was controlled in a way that meant he was holding back. He asked me one question. Are you choosing him over our son? I told him that wasn't fair. He said fairness stopped mattering when Jay stopped feeling safe in his own home. He said he's already looking into adjusting custody because he won't leave Jay somewhere his personal space isn't respected. That scared me. Not because I think Dee would take Jay away out of spite, but because I could hear how serious he was. I told him James never agreed to the lock in the first place. That it's James's house. That I can't just override him. Dee said, "That's your child. Not his. And if you can't protect him, I will." I lost my temper then. I told Dee he doesn't get to storm into my life and dictate how my household runs. That he's always aggressive, always escalating. That he talks about Jay like he's defective instead of hurting. That calling him shady and a bad influence is disgusting. Then I crossed the line. I told him he was a terrible father for turning every disagreement into a war, and for teaching Jay that conflict is solved by threats. There was silence on the line. Then he said something that still won't leave my head. At least I don't teach him that his comfort matters less than keeping a man happy. We hung up after that. I cried in my car for a long time before going back inside. Since then, the house has felt tense and quiet. Jay stays in his room with the door open. The stepbrothers still wander in and out like it's communal space. I've told them to stop, but without a physical boundary, they don't take it seriously. James sees this as proof that locks aren't necessary, just better behavior. I see it as a power imbalance that favors the louder voices. James and I haven't resolved it. He's not budging. He thinks giving Jay a lock sets a precedent he doesn't want. He thinks Dee is poisoning Jay against him. He thinks I need to stop straddling the fence and commit to our marriage. Dee hasn't spoken to James again. He barely speaks to me. Jay hasn't asked to go to his dad's early, but I can feel him pulling away from me. I feel like I failed everyone in different ways. I didn't defend my son loudly enough. I didn't challenge my husband firmly enough. I let my ex push me into a fight instead of setting clear boundaries. But I also don't think it's unreasonable to expect house rules to be respected, or for conversations to happen without threats and insults. So now I'm stuck asking strangers for perspective, because I don't trust my own judgment anymore. Ada. Comments. Comment 1. You married a man who doesn't like your kid. Let's just say it. James doesn't like Jay. He tolerates him. There's no warmth, no curiosity about who Jay is as a person, just constant correction and complaints about how Jay isn't blending well enough. You say you understand both sides, but James isn't showing sides. He's showing a power play. Jay got a lock to protect his things, not to hide drugs, not to sneak girls in, and James treated it like a threat. That's not reasonable parenting. That's ego. Then instead of apologizing for overstepping, he doubled down. And now you're the one doing damage control. Meanwhile, your ex is losing his mind because you've allowed his son to be gaslit by a stepdad who clearly doesn't see him as family. And you call him the problem for reacting with emotion. God forbid someone care a little too loudly. Your husband doesn't need a lesson in house rules. He needs therapy. And you need to ask yourself why you're okay watching your son shrink so James can feel like the man of the house. Comment 2. Everyone here acting like OP is some spineless monster for not blowing up her whole marriage over a door lock needs to sit down. I'm a stepmom. I've been in these rooms. You're juggling your husband's ego, your kid's emotional needs, your ex's rage, and your own guilt, all while trying not to light the damn house on fire. It's not always, just pick your kid. Sometimes it's, how do I not turn this into a custody war and destroy what little peace I have? James is wrong. Dead wrong. No debate there. But OP's ex isn't a hero either. He showed up like a battering ram instead of calling for a calm discussion. You don't build trust like that, you just shift the chaos onto your kid. People love to say, I'd burn it all down for my child. Cool. But some of us are trying to keep things livable. Comment 3. What stands out to me isn't the lock. It's how quickly you rationalize away your son's distress. It's his house. I don't want to escalate. I understand both sides. Those are the phrases people use when they're watching harm happen, but don't want to name it. Your husband didn't just remove a lock. He removed your son's last line of control in a space where he's already outnumbered. Then he framed your son's reaction as a character flaw. And you let that narrative stand. You say you're afraid of undermining your marriage. But from the outside, it looks like you already chose which relationship you're willing to sacrifice. Kids don't remember every argument. They remember who protected them. Right now, that person isn't you. Update. It's been about 6 weeks since the lock situation exploded, and I owe you all an honest update. Some of you were incredibly harsh, but you weren't wrong. I've read your comments more times than I want to admit. I was trying to keep the peace in my home and thought that meant not taking sides. But in doing that, I did take a side, just not the one that needed me. The fallout has been worse than I expected, and I think this might be the beginning of the end of my marriage. Right after the original post, I tried to take a proactive step and arranged a sit-down between the 5 of us. Me, James, Jay, Ryan, and Caleb. I told James ahead of time that this wasn't about siding with anyone, it was about resetting boundaries and listening. He agreed, but his tone was already off. We all sat at the table. Jay was calm, surprisingly so. He said, "I don't feel safe in this house. I don't feel respected. I want basic privacy, and I want to stop being treated like I'm hiding something because I don't act like Ryan and Caleb." James immediately interrupted. "So the problem is us now?" Jay said, "No. The problem is that no one listens unless I break down or beg." Then James said it. "If you hate it here that much, maybe you should just live with your dad." He said it like a joke, like a test. Jay looked at him, stood up, and said, "Okay." I turned to James and said, "Absolutely not. That's not how this is going to work." James tried to backpedal, saying he didn't mean it that way. But the damage was done. Jay walked out, went to his room, and shut the door, which still had no lock. Later that night, I found out James had confiscated Jay's replacement phone, which Dee had given him after the stepbrothers broke the last one. The explanation? James said Dee shouldn't be rewarding tantrums with expensive electronics. I blew up. That was not a parenting decision we agreed on. He had taken it without telling me, and it had been hidden in the garage toolbox. I returned it to Jay and apologized. Then 2 days later, Ryan, the 14-year-old, snuck into Jay's room and dropped the phone on the tile floor in the bathroom. The screen shattered again. When I asked what happened, Ryan said, "I was just looking at it." Jay said Ryan came in while he was in the shower and took it off the charger. James's response: "If he didn't want it touched, he shouldn't leave it out." That line broke something in me. That was the exact same thing James had said during the drone incident. Same blame shifting. Same dismissal. I called Dee and told him what happened. I could hear him pacing through the phone. He didn't yell. He said, "This ends now." 3 days later, I was served a cease and desist letter from a lawyer, demanding that we allow Jay a locked, private space, and stating that if Jay's belongings continued to be damaged or accessed without consent, Dee would file for custody modification on the grounds of emotional endangerment. James was furious. He called it legal bullying. I tried to talk him down, but he was already worked up. He said Dee had poisoned Jay against this family. But that same week, things went from legal to physical. Jay and Ryan got into a full-blown fight. Apparently, Ryan had been making jokes about Jay needing a lawyer for a bedtime story, and Jay snapped. Pushed him. Ryan shoved back. Jay punched him in the face. Caleb ran and got us. By the time we separated them, Ryan had a bloody nose, and Jay's hand was red and shaking. James started yelling at Jay, not yelling at the situation, not yelling in shock. Yelling at Jay. "This is why no one trusts you. You don't belong in this house if you act like that." I told James to stop. Told him he wasn't helping. He looked me in the eye and said, "He's not your son anymore if you don't get him under control." That night, Jay packed a bag. I didn't stop him. I sat on his bed and asked if he could stay just until we figured something out legally. He said, "No, Mom, I've already figured it out." He looked tired, older than he should. He said, "You picked him a long time ago. This isn't new." Then I said something I regret more than anything. I said, "Your sister wouldn't want you to push people away like this." Jay turned to me and said, "Don't you dare use Lily to guilt me into staying in a place that makes me feel like SHT. He said, "She's not a bargaining chip. She's the reason I stayed this long, and she's the reason I'm finally leaving. Because if she were here, you wouldn't let this happen to her." He was right, and I was horrified at myself. Dee picked him up that night. They didn't even stay in town. He took Jay to his place out of state. He had just started a remote job and could finally live somewhere more affordable. I tried to get Jay on the phone 2 days later. He didn't answer. Then, last week, I found out something that made my blood run cold. James had been calling military boarding schools for at-risk youth. He was looking into sending Jay away if things got worse. He hadn't told me. I found the emails in the shared laptop history. That's when I realized something very plain. James never wanted to parent Jay. He wanted Jay to fall in line or get out of the way. I've started sleeping in the guest room. I'm looking into temporary separation. I don't even care about the marriage right now. My son's not talking to me. My daughter is gone. And I am the one who let all of this happen because I couldn't stand the idea of another war. The worst part? I don't know if I'll ever fully repair this with Jay. But I'm going to try, and this time, I won't be silent when he needs me to speak. Comments. Comment 1. I'm going to say something you probably don't want to hear. You didn't just mess up. You actively taught your son that his pain is negotiable. The moment you used his dead sister to pressure him into staying somewhere he didn't feel safe. That's not a slip. That's emotional blackmail. I don't care how broken you are, that's a line you don't cross. Ever. Your husband didn't accidentally become abusive. He tested boundaries, saw you wouldn't stop him, and kept going. The lock, the phone, the fight, the military school SHT, that's escalation, not misunderstanding. Your ex isn't perfect, but he saw the danger way before you did and acted. Your son didn't run away. He escaped. If you want any chance at a relationship with him later, stop centering your guilt and start owning the harm. Comment 2. What jumps out to me is how many warning signs there were before this blew up. Confiscating property that doesn't belong to him. Allowing other children to enter a teenager's room without consent. Threatening removal from the home as leverage. Researching military schools without parental agreement. Those aren't parenting disagreements, those are documented behaviors that family courts absolutely care about. Your ex didn't overreact by getting a lawyer. He did exactly what a parent is supposed to do when a child's safety is compromised. I don't think you're malicious. I think you underestimated how much damage passivity can do. Unfortunately, courts don't grade on intent, they grade on outcomes. If you want to repair this, stop framing it as a marital issue. Start treating it like what it is. A custody and child welfare issue that you ignored for too long. Comment 3. I buried a child. I stayed married. And I still recognize what you did. Grief makes people cling to stability at all costs. Sometimes that stability is a marriage. Sometimes it's a routine. Sometimes it's a lie we tell ourselves so we don't have to blow our lives up again. You chose stability over truth. Over and over. Your son didn't need you to fix everything. He needed you to say, "This stops now," and mean it. You couldn't, because that would have meant losing something else you weren't ready to lose. The fact that he called you out so clearly tells me he's stronger than you think and more aware than you were prepared for. Don't chase forgiveness. Don't rush contact. Do the work quietly and consistently. Maybe one day he'll let you back in. Or maybe he won't. And that's the consequence. Update. It's been a few months since everything fell apart. This will probably be my last update. I've read every DM and every comment, even the brutal ones. Some part of me thought posting here again would help organize the chaos. So here it is. James and I are over. I moved out. It was his house legally, financially, everything. I sold my place when we got married, and we lived in his home with his boys. When things with Jay spiraled, I stayed because I thought I'd lose everything if I left. And I did lose all of that anyway. But not for the reasons I told myself. A few weeks after Jay moved in with Dee, I started writing him a letter. Someone in my support group told me that if I couldn't talk to him directly, I should write what I'd say face to face with no pressure for him to respond. I rewrote that letter 12 times. It wasn't perfect, but I meant every word. I told him I knew I failed him. That I let people walk all over him under the excuse of keeping the peace. That I should have been his wall, not a window people passed through to get to him. It came back 2 weeks later. Sealed in another envelope. The outside said, in his handwriting, "Please stop. I'm not ready to hear from you." Shortly after, I found out through James's cousin, not even directly from him, that he'd told his entire family that Jay chose to live with his dad permanently because he didn't want to follow rules. He said I was caught in the middle, that I was emotionally manipulated by a rebellious teenager, and that at least the other 2 boys weren't damaged. I didn't correct it. I didn't say anything when his aunt gave me a hug and said, "You did your best with that kid, some just don't want to be helped." I froze. I let them believe that version of events because it meant not having to explain the real one. That silence killed whatever was left of my marriage. The week I moved out, I was already 11 weeks pregnant. James didn't want the baby. He didn't say it cruelly. He said it coldly. "This isn't the time. We're not stable." You'll have to do most of it alone anyway. He didn't offer support, didn't ask how I felt about it, just told me I needed to make a decision fast. I kept it. I don't know if that was brave or stupid yet. I texted Jay about it. Not a guilt trip, just a picture of the sonogram and a short message. You're going to have a sibling. I thought you should know. No reply. I checked a few hours later and saw I'd been blocked. That was when I knew. There wasn't going to be a magic reunion. No moment where he saw I was suffering and decided to forgive me. He's not cruel. He's protecting himself. And I'm the reason he has to. James and I formally separated a month later. I didn't fight for the house. I didn't want it. His boys Ryan and Caleb didn't do any of this maliciously. They were kids. Teenagers do stupid things. I can say now, with distance, that I never hated them. I loved them. Still do in some ways. But I let them grow up believing Jay was the outsider, and that dynamic created all the rest. Ryan has since reached out to Jay and apologized. I only know because Dee mentioned it when we crossed paths during a handoff of some of Jay's remaining things. I didn't ask for details. I just said I was glad. As for custody, Dee has full legal and physical custody now. I signed the paperwork voluntarily. Jay made it clear through his lawyer, yes, he has one now, that he didn't want split custody. Just supervised visitation if he ever decided to re-engage. I didn't fight it. I won't be that person who drags a child into court just to feel like a parent again. I live in a rented one-bedroom now. The baby's due in March. I'm working again. Nothing glamorous, but it pays. Sometimes I reread the last text Jay sent before everything fell apart. It wasn't long. It just said, "You picked your peace over me. You don't get to pick me back now." People in my life still ask if I hate Dee. I think he poisoned Jay against me. I don't. He reacted exactly how he should have when he saw our son was being diminished, not raised. He was loud, aggressive, protective. All the things I should have been first. I still hear James's voice in my head sometimes. "You're too emotional. You coddle him. He'll never learn to adapt if you keep excusing his behavior." And I believed that. For too long. So here's where it ends. I don't hate my son. I never did. I didn't want to choose between being a wife and being a mother. But the conditions I lived in made that line real. And I made the wrong call. People think the worst part is that he won't forgive me. It's not. The worst part is that he shouldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And I have to live with that. Comments. Comment 1. You keep insisting you're not a bad mother. I think that's the only line in this whole thing you haven't questioned yet. What makes a bad mother? Letting a controlling man dictate your son's environment. Staying quiet while your child was emotionally isolated. Sending a sonogram photo like that would be received as joy instead of manipulation. I'm not saying you don't love your kid. I'm saying you love the idea of being a mom more than you respect the role of being one. When push came to shove, you chose performative peace and plausible deniability. So yeah, you didn't neglect him in the textbook sense. But you left him defenseless in a war you pretended wasn't happening. That's not a mother. That's a witness. Comment 2. You really F-ed James over after all this? Wow. I don't think you actually understand what you did here. You didn't just fail to support your son. You recreated the trauma of losing Lily, just in a different form. The moment you stayed silent, while your husband minimized, mocked, and erased your son's needs, you told Jay he wasn't worth protecting. Again. You chose comfort over confrontation. Again. You confirmed his worst fear. That when it really mattered, no one was coming for him. And here's the part that really stings. You knew. You saw it unfolding in real time. You just didn't want to be the apt guy, so you stayed quiet while someone else did the damage. I don't doubt that you love your son. But love without action isn't protection, it's a liability. And he finally realized that. Comment 3. Wild how the bar was literally on the floor. Don't let your kid get emotionally steamrolled by your husband and his kids. And you still tripped over it. You watched your son lose control over his space, his things, his autonomy, and his safety. Then you handed him a sonogram like that was some kind of peace offering. You do realize a baby doesn't fix abandonment, right? That's not a band-aid, it's another wound he didn't ask for. You didn't want peace. You wanted silence. And now you've got it. Congrats, I guess. Second story. I spent my entire salary to surprise my boyfriend for Christmas, bought something, and ruined everything. I think I kind of deserve to be laughed at. I kind of deserve to be made fun of for this. But hear me out. I am not particularly a Tolkien fan. Not because his work isn't absolutely legendary. and doesn't deserve all of the reverence that it gets. It's simply because I'm not much of a fan of fantasy novels. However, my boyfriend deeply loves Tolkien's work, and I love that for him. And the man is such a gem that I want to spoil him rotten. Anyhow, I was at a vintage store, and I came across this book set, which I had never seen before at any other used bookstore. I was nervous about the purchase and wanted to research it better before going through the checkout line. But of course, just my luck. I had no cell service in this small town. I even tried walking 2 blocks away from this vintage store, praying a cell signal would make itself known and save my life. No luck. So I decided to just be a brave girl and purchase it. Mind you, at the store, this book set is saran wrapped. I was not allowed to open it and get a closer look at the books before purchasing. I get it home and immediately feel devastated upon discovering the pages are as yellow as an agoraphobic chain smoker's walls. I thought it couldn't get worse. Until, to humiliate myself further, once I finally regain cell service, I Google it and discover that the set is missing a goddamn book. I am so completely, entirely, deeply embarrassed and ashamed for not knowing any better. I literally cried. And no, the vintage store did not accept returns. I don't have enough money to repurchase the correct set for him. I spent $50 at the vintage store, and even that was already getting outside of the budget I have on my pathetic barista salary at the moment. But God, one of my absolute favorite things about my boyfriend is how much he loves to read and how much he cares for his books. He doesn't dog-ear pages. He carefully mends any tears and meticulously organizes them on his shelves. I was really hoping to knock one out of the park with this one, and instead I wasted my money and embarrassed myself. I told him I bought him a gift that ended up being a fail, and I vowed to never tell him what it was, and I mean that. That being said, would it be a crime against Tolkien if I repurposed this book set into some sort of art piece? I do collage work, and I've been brainstorming some ways I could use excerpts of the text and/or the covers to make something for him in the future. Should I just sell it for pennies? Should I just burn it? Put it on a street corner for free? I'm kidding about that. But truly, the pages are a traumatizing shade of yellow. And although my boyfriend would not expect perfection out of a vintage set, even for my taste, the damage and missing book are too severe to gift to him. I feel so dumb. But because the shell that the books came in didn't look like they had much wiggle room, I would have never thought a book was missing. I can barely fit my thumb in between the books and the shelf, so it just didn't dawn on me that The Hobbit should have been there. TLDR. Bought my boyfriend a vintage Tolkien set. Was unable to get a good look at it before purchasing, only to discover super yellow pages, and humiliated myself into oblivion when realizing that The Hobbit should have been included. WTF do I do with it now? Edit. Good heavens, thank you so much for your responses, everyone. I did not expect to get unanimous encouragement to give it to him. This has totally made my day. Despite its imperfections, I'm so excited to gift it to him after all. Thank you to the Redditors who confirmed that the set I got actually should not have come with The Hobbit after all. Right after I brought it home, I searched eBay and saw a vintage set in a red box did come with it, so I assumed mine should have as well. But I just revisited eBay and saw a few red box sets that don't have The Hobbit included. Also, thank you to the Redditors who confirmed that when this particular set was brand new, the edges of the pages were intentionally color-stained yellow. Because although I have quite a few old books myself that have pages that have yellowed due to age, these pages seem to be an unnatural shade of yellow, so the color stain makes so much sense. Christmas is saved, y'all. Comments. Comment 1. Sets of Tolkien were and are sold both with and without The Hobbit. Based on how they fit in the box, my guess is that this set never included it. As for the yellowed pages, that's normal for books this age. This particular edition has cover art by Tolkien himself, which is a nice thing. And given that it has the slipcase, I don't think that you necessarily overpaid. In general though, I would never buy books that you can't physically examine before purchase. OP. By nature I am such a careful, calculated person that I'm shocked I even had the gall to purchase a book I couldn't examine first. But that day, I was a combination of brutally hungover and foolishly brave. Comment 2. You already got a lot of great responses, so I just wanted to let you know that you should switch between the book on the right and the middle. Fellowship is the first book, Two Towers is the second, and Return of the King is the third. OP. Thank you. Luckily that's at least one thing I'm aware of despite not being able to be classified as a legitimate fan. I scrambled them up in the midst of my frustration after I had my initial meltdown. But I will absolutely put them back in order before gifting them to him. Update. Tried to edit my previous post and couldn't. If you have no idea what's going on, refer to that post first. So here's an update for everyone who was generous enough to comment. I checked the spine this morning, and despite the optimism some of you shared with me, it absolutely should have had The Hobbit in this set. Which is now refreshing my memory as to why I doom spiraled so hard a few months ago when I bought the set. But hey, I'm still going to be a good sport and gift it to my boyfriend. But there's a strong chance I might be taking up you over Hillenderhill's offer to send me a copy of The Hobbit after all. Comments. Comment 1. I don't see how a copy of The Hobbit would even fit in it. OP, honestly, same. I'm going to have to torture the poor books just to squeeze in The Hobbit. Comment 2. Don't do it. Don't ruin the box to try and make it one package. Just gift it on the side. Also, can you post the edition/printing page? That's the one that determines uniqueness, etc. OP, I think you're right. I'd likely damage the slipcase if I tried to stuff The Hobbit into it. Update. I made a post a while back sharing that I'd epically failed after taking a risk and buying my boyfriend a Tolkien book set for Christmas at a vintage shop without being able to do research on it first. With my luck, I discovered later that not only were the edges of the pages well beyond the usual shade of vintage book yellow, but worse, the set was also missing The Hobbit. Well, the plot has since massively thickened, and the story gave way to a crescendo I was not expecting. I've got updates for you. The first two nowhere near as thrilling as the third. Most of you commented on my original post, saying that my set was never meant to include The Hobbit, even though my slipcase listed it. And man, I'll hand it to you, some of you had me properly doubting myself for a moment, thinking, wow, maybe I didn't make much of a blunder after all. Then, multiple Redditors commented, saying they had the same set when it was brand new or nearly new, and all 4 books did in fact originally come with and fit in that case. That is, apparently, only until you read the books. Once read, they'd expand and become difficult to get back into the case without damaging it. Hearing that, it doesn't surprise me at all that so many of you own a set that only includes the trilogy. If all 4 couldn't fit, The Hobbit is unfortunately the perfect book to detach from the set. Regarding the chain smoker-esque yellow hue of page edges, to those who said that the pages weren't far off from how vintage books simply age over time, I think if you could see them in person, you'd get my initial panic. I've loved old books my whole life and had never seen pages that yellow before, unless there was damage present. I still figured there was something wrong until multiple Redditors commented that even when the set was brand new, the edges of the pages were originally printed with color-stained yellow edges. That makes infinitely more sense. Again, those 2 things and posting a few more photos of the set I originally purchased are not remotely the reason I'm even posting this update. It's to share how this whole saga reached some unexpected heights. A Redditor read my original post about how much my boyfriend reveres Tolkien's work, as well as how, despite my good intentions, my foolish optimism led to both Christmas gift misfortune and a financial setback, particularly due to my meager barista salary. In response, this Redditor sent me not only the missing copy of The Hobbit that belongs to the 1973 set I purchased, but also some truly incredible items I could have never dreamed of being able to gift my boyfriend. For free. He would not even allow me to pay shipping. I'm not often one to shed happy tears, but without knowing the contents of what he had even planned to send in the first place, other than The Hobbit, I opened the boxes this Redditor sent me, and I sobbed. Any photos I included in my post today, aside from the 1973 trilogy and its slipcase, are what he sent to me. I've already thanked him profusely in a DM, but I want to again thank you /Overhill_Underhill. Your generosity has truly left me in awe, and the words to properly thank you have continuously failed me. I would have been thrilled even to have been given The Hobbit, but all of the other books you gifted are absolutely incredible and will be deeply cherished by my boyfriend. The print signed by Andy Serkis might genuinely break his brain. It broke mine. I also wanted to thank the rest of you for responding to my original post and encouraging me to gift the set to my boyfriend despite its flaws. I appreciate the helpful information, plot twists, generosity, laughter, and even the arsehole comments because it truly wouldn't have been Reddit without them. I can't even fathom what my boyfriend's reaction will be on Christmas Day. He'll know immediately by the sheer number of presents under the tree that I wouldn't have had enough money to purchase all those things for him. He has no idea what the nature of his gifts is. He just knows there's tons of lore involved and extra gifts as a result. I at least had to spoil the fact that the Reddit community came together for him for Christmas, simply because I didn't want him stumbling on any of my posts by accident. So the poor man agreed to stay off Reddit until Christmas. I was feeling down about Christmas this year because I could afford so little for my boyfriend, but now I'm genuinely excited. I can't wait for him to open his gifts and to send him a link to the original post so he can read this entire saga for himself. Merry Christmas, everyone. Edit TLDR. I bought my boyfriend a vintage Tolkien set for Christmas that I later realized appeared damaged and was missing a copy of The Hobbit. I felt foolish since I'm completely broke and wasted what little money I had. I posted asking for advice. A Redditor said he'd send the missing book for free. Wouldn't even let me pay shipping. To my surprise, he also sent all of the other books included in the photos, as well as a print signed by Andy Serkis, not knowing what was in it. I opened the package he sent and started sobbing. Because you over Hill under Hill's generosity not only saved my Christmas, but basically guaranteed it would be an unforgettable one. Comments. Comment 1. I am happy to have come across your original post and be able to help out. The Tolkien community in general has always been such a kind and sharing one, so I always do my best to uphold that. I have had the pleasure of meeting Andy Serkis a few times at events, so I definitely wanted to include one of the autographs I'd gotten as an extra surprise. Thank you to everyone in this community, and everyone that commented on the original post and shared your knowledge on the box set, and your reassurance that the OP had not made a mistake with her purchase. And as Sam said, there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. Comment 2. Failed. Man, if my wife went to the lengths you did for my birthday, I'd be honored. I definitely think your boyfriend will love it. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.